What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Rotoworld Basketball Show presented by NBC. I'm Dan Titus, joined with Raphielle Johnson and Noah Rubin. We're into Week 7, Part 2. If you're playing on Yahoo, realize that the scheduling is a little bit tricky this year because of the NBA Cup. Each platform has their own scheduling parameters, but we're going to be speaking to Yahoo terms. So hopefully that doesn't get too confusing for you guys, but we'll still give you the same recommendations and advice that we normally do. Today, we're going to talk about the NBA Cup. We're going to talk about some injuries and some injury news that just recently popped up on our screens and our notifications. And we're going to give out some early season awards. So we're about 30% into the season. So I think it's a good time to kind of reflect on what we've seen and potentially talk about some buys and sells that we could be approaching at this time of year, because the trade deadline's opening up in real life. So I think that fantasy managers also need to be thinking about that as well. So let's talk about the NBA Cup for a second, guys. Raph, want to get your perspective on the Bucks and Magic. It was a really good game, 114 to 109. I think a lot of people may have been surprised about how well the Orlando Magic played in their second game without Franz Wagner. Without their two All-Stars, man, I just couldn't help but notice how well coached this team is and how great those role players stepped up. But want to get your takeaways from that game first.
Yeah, they're a really tough group. I think we all saw that last night, the way they competed for much of that game. When it was winning time, that's when you need your stars, and Milwaukee had theirs and Orlando didn't. So that was pretty much the difference in that one. But I think one thing that caught me not really by surprise was like how many shots Jalen Suggs got up in that game. 26 shots. So I think he's already rostered in most leagues, so he's not really going to be someone to add. Maybe you're looking at like an Anthony Black. No three-pointers, but the defensive potential and the minutes are something to keep an eye on here from a fantasy standpoint. So I think he and Goga Bitadze are the two that stood out to me in terms of fantasy value, and also Jalen Suggs, just number of shots he got up last night.
Yeah, I think just seeing Suggs' development was a lot of fun, because I think coming out of college, the expectations for him were a lot higher, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And he had a little bit more usage as a rookie, and then they've kind of slowly moved him into kind of not like a 3-and-D, but like more like a 3-and-D player than I think we were initially expecting him to be. So seeing him step up like this was a lot of fun, to see him kind of do that as a scorer. And then my expectations were that Cole Anthony would kind of step up on offense, because they need somebody that can create his own shot. And he created his own shot. It just didn't really go in that game. But I think they'll still continue to kind of lean on him a little bit. But also seeing Anthony Black off the bench put up a full stat line, a lot of defensive numbers, that was really good to see, because that's what had him drafted as early as he was drafted, was the defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's 32 points, career high, 9 rebounds, a career high. I think it just speaks to Jamal Mosley, and I think he needs more credit for being coach of the year right now. Right now, he's the third shortest odds, I believe, on BetMGM to be coach of the year. But I mean, Anthony Black gave them solid minutes. Mo Wagner gave them solid minutes. And it was just really impressive of how they were able to attack the Bucks defense and just get easy shots at the rim for a lot of the first half. Like, this game shouldn't have been particularly close. And then it was like Giannis for 3 quarters and then Dame time in the fourth. So I think that that's something we'll probably see from them going forward as Dame kind of learns how to play with Giannis a little bit more. Bobby Portis, got to give him a shout out, because for fantasy, dude's 18 for 21 over his last 2 games. Not sustainable at all. Doubt that there's a sell high moment here. I don't know how attractive Bobby Portis is on waiver wires, but if you can get something for him, probably a good idea to float that out there, because this dude is scorching hot, coming off 22 points, 10 boards, 4 assists. I want to talk about Chris Middleton just for a second, because he played 20 minutes, obviously has a minutes restriction that's probably going to carry on for a while. Noah, as a fantasy manager, did you see anything encouraging from Chris Middleton that makes you want to hold him, even though he's probably going to be under a minutes restriction for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I think what he did was very encouraging, even if he hasn't been able to hit a shot since he came back. Like, that has been a major struggle for him, but we know how he is as a shooter. Like, we know that he'll figure that out. Like, that's not something that a lot of players lose as they get older. Like, the shot ages pretty well generally, but 4 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 steals. Like, he's still impacting the game without making any shots, which to me is really encouraging, because as he gets his legs back under him, gets used to playing professional basketball again, like the shot will come back. So he seems like a guy that even in 20 minutes should be a rosterable player when he's able to start hitting shots more regularly. But then as he gets back to being a 28 to 30 minute per game player, he can be really impactful in fantasy.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. I agree with Noah's points about the assists and the steals, especially. He's not someone that most managers are going to be drafting with him as like a marquee figure in their teams. So I think unless you made that mistake in your draft, then you should be able to kind of exercise some patience here. You might take a hit in the points and field goal percentage categories, but it's quite clear that he can provide value in other areas until he gets his legs back under him.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how long the minutes restriction lasts, but I got to imagine a guy coming off 2 ankle surgeries is probably going to be pretty conservatively ramped up over the course of time here. But I think those 8 assists was huge for the Bucks because I think it's clear that they need someone to be able to generate some kind of scoring outside of Damian Lillard. So I came away actually more impressed with the Orlando Magic than I did the Bucks, but I think the Bucks at least are showing some version of stability now that they're kind of getting out of their funk in the Eastern Conference. They're now 13-11 on the season. So definitely moving in the right direction. Let's talk about the Thunder and the Dallas Mavericks. That was a great game, especially if you were a Thunder fan. I'm rocking the hat in as basically being a bandwagon for the night because they were I just came away just like, damn, this defense is just unstoppable. So disruptive. I mean, the entry passes that they were just taking away from everything that the Dallas Mavericks wanted to do in the post. Luka was just throwing turnover after turnover. I mean, the fact that you can let Klay Thompson be the only starter in double figures in the first half just speaks to how good your defense was. And this was a statement game for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So, Raph, want to get your takes on now that the Oklahoma City Thunder is advancing, is there anyone that could help fantasy managers on Saturday when they go to that Vegas game?
I think Cason Wallace is someone to be mindful of. Now, he's not going to give you much in the way of points, but the defensive stats can certainly be helpful in category leagues. I think he's 9% rostered right now still. Yeah. So he should be available in a lot of leagues. I think the minute split between he, Isaiah Joe, and Aaron Wiggins was kind of what caught my eye last night. He played 31, Joe 17, and Wiggins 9. That usually is more equal in terms of those three. So I don't know if there's anything to take away in terms of separation moving forward, but I think that's an encouraging sign for him. What more can you say about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, though? Like, the guy's a clear MVP candidate. Not just fantasy basketball, but actual NBA basketball, given how well he's played and how well that team has performed. Jalen Williams, I think he's a top 10 fantasy player right now in terms of production. Thought he'd be good, but not this good. So, Isaiah Hartenstein has fit in well as expected. It doesn't feel like this is a team that's just going to be treading water until Chet Holmgren returns, whenever that is. I think they're just going to continue to flourish.
Yeah, I think, like you said, Dan, you said that it was a statement game for the Thunder. It kind of tells everyone, hey, this is this is what things could look like in the playoffs. They have a very deep rotation, incredibly disruptive on the defensive end. SGA is obviously a star. Jalen Williams can play his best game, and like you already said, he's a top 10 player in fantasy. So definitely a guy that we should see better games from. We have seen better games from, but they were still able to win this game by double digits, which was, I don't know, just very impressive to me for this entire team, just top to bottom. And I think leaning on Cason Wallace a little bit more, like you said, Raph, was a little bit interesting. Maybe that's something that they're trying to, during the regular season, keep it a little bit more even. But when push comes to shove, if this was like a playoff game, which technically it was win or go home for this tournament, that's what the rotation looked like. So maybe they will lean on Cason Wallace a little bit more when basketball gets a little bit more meaningful.
Yeah, another name I would throw out there for fantasy managers on Saturday would be Lou Dort. His rostership dropped a lot with him seeing starters minutes and obviously being a 3-point threat now, getting the stocks. He's definitely a person that could also help out outside of Cason Wallace, a guy that's really stepped up. Man, the other aspect of it was like I was trying to figure out, like, is this just the Thunder playing up to their standard? But like, they're not really a good rebounding team, but you just see how infectious Isaiah Hartenstein being in that lineup does for your team, man. Like, the offensive rebounding and just the extra points, the second chance points that they were getting. This isn't even the ceiling for the Thunder, which is absolutely crazy because Dallas stood in their way last year. And so I think that they remembered that. And to Raph's point, like that was an SGA clinic. And I was looking at some numbers something we'll debut in a little bit, but it's just crazy how much more SGA drives than any other player in the league. It's by like 3 or 4 additional drives. And when you're talking about fantasy, you want players that get easy shots at the rim. He's like shooting 50% on his drives. So like you can't, not only does he have the mid-range lockdown, he's got shots at the rim. He doesn't even need to shoot that many threes. And even if he decides to do it, he's probably going to hit those too. So man, he's just such an efficient player on both sides of the ball. Just an absolute thrill to watch. We didn't talk about Dallas much, but got to be honest. I mean, I was just like kind of let down by Dallas. I had them. They were my pick for the NBA Cup, unfortunately. Didn't really get to see Kyrie and Luka go off into the end, and it was too late. So I don't know if there's any takeaways from you guys from that side of the ball, but I think I was mainly thinking that PJ Washington would play in this game, and that was partially why I believed in Dallas. They were winning. They were on a 7-game winning streak before meeting the Thunder. But without PJ Washington, I think it was a little bit of a different story in trying to contain the Thunder, who just went on a 3-point shooting barrage.
Yeah, I think the one takeaway for me was Najee Marshall. Like before the game, Jason Kidd said he was on a restriction of 20 to 25 minutes after missing 4. Then he goes and scores 14 points in 15 first half minutes. So it's like, yeah, we kind of need him out here a bit more. He played 29 minutes. Again, as was the case when Luka was out, he's not going to give you too much in the defensive stats, but the scoring definitely makes him worth the risk in the short term. If they don't play again until Sunday, so I don't know if PJ will probably be back by then, but if not, I think Najee Marshall should probably be back on the fantasy radar.
Yeah, I think my main takeaway is that, Dan, you have a Hawks fan and a Knicks fan in here, and you're telling us you picked Dallas. Like, come on, man. You could have asked us. We would have given you a better take. But no, I mean, Dallas struggling the way they did, like it was, I think, more of a credit to OKC's defense than, I mean, I'm not worried about Luka having a poor shooting night or anything like that. So, yeah, I think this was, to me, more of OKC showing out than Dallas not showing up.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the best way to take it. And I think we can expect a Dallas comeback on Sunday. On the injury front, though, big news. Let's start with Franz Wagner. He's going to be missing at least 4 to 6 weeks. He's going to be reevaluated in 4 weeks. Somehow, some way, was able to suffer the exact same injury as Paolo Banchero. What are the odds? Good news for the Magic. It looks like Paolo Banchero should be returning by Christmas. So this could be the Jalen Suggs, Goga Batadze show for the next couple of weeks. And hopefully we'll see Paolo Banchero back for fantasy managers. I think there's still a nice little buy low window open right now for those that may be sleeping at the wheel that don't know that Paolo's returning soon. Also, Brandon Ingram's going to be out indefinitely. That just pretty much just sucks for the Pelicans getting healthy and then right back to not being healthy. And, you know, after this dude just retains new representation and he obviously wants his contract, not a good look to be out indefinitely right now. But I think the bigger news is that Scottie Barnes is going to miss multiple weeks. There was no definitive number tied to those multiple weeks. Given where the Raptors are, Noah, does this put them really in the lottery sweepstakes? And it's crazy because coming into the season, a lot of people were excited about the combination between Emmanuel Quickley and Scottie Barnes. They've only played 1 game together. And we know the one person, there's going to be a few people that are going to benefit with Scottie out. The main guy is RJ Barrett, but I think there's some other opportunities for other players to step up as well.
Yeah, I think coming into the season, the expectation was that they were going to be a lottery team. And I was kind of like, there's a good bit of talent on this team. Maybe they'll be a little bit more competitive than we're thinking. Like they could be a play-in team if they stay healthy, but they haven't stayed healthy and they haven't won games even with all these, like when some of the guys have been able to play. So I think that they're definitely like full on a lottery team now. And I think that some of the main guys that'll benefit from Scottie Barnes being out, Davion Mitchell will be back. I would assume in the starting lineup, but at least playing a good amount of minutes as the primary playmaker. We saw what he did when Scottie Barnes was out previously, and Emmanuel Quickley has pretty much been out that entire time. So Him for assists and maybe a couple steals, and then he'll probably have a couple of good scoring games here and there. And then Ochai Agbaji as well is going to be a guy that has been pretty solid this year because of the injuries. And now with Barnes back out, should get back to being kind of a standard league guy.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add there. Kelly Olynyk is back, so maybe he gets more opportunities. So that's someone else. If anything, I'd probably just say keep an eye on rookies Jonathan Mobo and Jacoby Walter. If this goes south as we kind of feel like it potentially could with all these injuries to key guys, I'd expect them to get more minutes. May not be the greatest fantasy value options at that point, but similar to Washington, the minutes may reach a point where it's kind of hard to justify not rostering them, at least in deep leagues.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I don't know if we mentioned Grady Dick, but obviously he's going to see a nice little bump there. In games without Scottie Barnes, he's averaging 30 fantasy points per game. That's up by nearly 7 points with Scottie Barnes on the floor. Love the Davion Mitchell call. He saw 30 minutes, average 30 minutes without Barnes on the floor. So definitely going to be a nice little assist and steals guy for you. And I think he doesn't get enough respect for his defense. We saw it in spurts with Sacramento, but just a hard-nosed defender for his size. Just really, really giving the Toronto Raptors a nice option off the bench. Kawhi Leonard's practicing. That's good news, right? Like I assume that he was going to make his debut at some point, but he's taking light practice. Raph, do you think that fantasy managers that roster Norman Powell or James Harden should be concerned if Kawhi Leonard is nearing a return to the lineup?
Not really, because we don't know. Like, I know he's back in practice, doing some light work, but there really wasn't much clarity provided by Ty Lue with regard to when he could potentially be back. Still a no contact guy at this stage. So I wouldn't be too concerned if I had Powell or Harden rostered, because we don't know exactly when he'll be back.
Yeah, I agree with that. We don't know. It could, and when he does come back, I mean, there's no way he plays a back-to-back. He might get, if it's, a certain amount of games, and 5 games in 7 days would include back-to-backs, whatever. But like a certain amount of games and a certain amount of days where they're like, yeah, this is a scheduled rest night. They probably won't play him 35 minutes per game. They might just keep him at 25 to 30 for a while, because why would they increase his minutes if they can get to the playoffs without him, and just adding him in there should help. So I'm not too worried about Norman Powell or James Harden. If one of them were to take more of a hit, it would be Powell. But I mean, I'm not too worried at this point.
Yeah, I wouldn't be worried at all. If anything, I think they're going to be slow playing it. The Clippers right now are treading above water. They're good. I think that they continue to ride this out. And if they can have a healthy Kawhi Leonard by playoff time, that's the goal here. So I wouldn't be worried. I think Norman Powell and James Harden are still great floor raisers for the regular season. So we'll probably see some 20, 25-minute Kawhi for the foreseeable future whenever he's ready to take contact. But I think that was a great caveat, Raph, that the fact that he's not taking contact, he's not really that close, right? Like the fact that he's practicing is a good development, but he's not going to be on the court in the next couple of weeks. Noah, how are you managing, because week 7, part 2 is a little bit interesting. We have this NBA Cup break here. We don't have games until Friday and then games on Sunday. Are you doing anything with your transactions? Like, are you hoarding them? Like, what's really been your strategy to kind of approach the back end of this week?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on which league I'm looking at. Some of them have a couple like games cap leagues, so I haven't really had to make many adjustments, and then obviously different platforms and stuff. But as far as managing it for this week, I think making sure that there was or is acquisitions for me to make this week was very big, because of 1 game on Monday, 2 on Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 on Thursday, and then I think Saturday is just back to 2 games because it's just NBA games. So making sure there was at least 1 or 2 transactions for each of those days was important, because the other days I should have at least somebody going. And if there's 8 games being played, I'll have somebody. But on these days, it's like, just for me, I want to make sure at least I'm getting 1 player, maybe 2 playing. So that was kind of it for me.
Yeah. How do you feel about it, Raph? Like, are you already looking ahead to week 8 in some cases? How are you kind of managing your waiver ads?
Well, in one of my leagues, I'm looking forward to the end of the season, but in terms of my more competitive leagues at this point. I think Noah's onto something here in terms of conserving your waiver moves, because Yahoo leagues with the combination, you don't get more waiver moves. So it's like you have 4 to spread out over 2 weeks, and targeting those light game days, like the remainder of this week, you've got obviously today with 2, then Thursday with 3, and then Saturday with 2. Those are kind of the days you kind of target. It's like, all right, if I don't have anyone going, is there someone I could potentially pick off the waiver wire and get some production for that day from?
Yeah, and I think that just speaks to, like, now, minus the Thursday game, you could really look for the NBA Cup, the teams that advanced. So look at, whoever wins this Hawks-Knicks battle. We have some friendly fire on the podcast right now. We'll see how this ends up. But then also you got the Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors that are also playing on Wednesday night. So I've been, saying this is like, I was kind of recommending this on the playlist, was like, if you think a team is going to win, pick up that player now. So then you have that short slate, that small slate on Saturday. So, I think players like Tari Eason, if he was available somehow when he was out for a concussion, someone dropped him, pick him up. I think, Buddy Hield is a player that's rostership's been down. You could pick him up as well if you think the Warriors are going to advance. Gary Payton II, I think, is a deep league guy that you can consider if you need some stocks and some rebounds. Noah, who are some other guys that you're looking at if your team is advancing, or whoever you think is advancing, to possibly get some games in on Saturday?
I mean, a lot of those, like the Thunder rotation guys that we kind of talked about with, Isaiah Joe and Cason Wallace mainly, some of those guys. And the Bucks are such a tough team to stream anybody in for. So
that's like the one team I feel like I'm avoiding in terms of streaming. Like, I threw out Taurean Prince last night because I was holding on to him, assuming that they were going to move on. And like, bro, he's just giving me Tony Snell energy, and I just can't do it. Can't do it.
And you're obviously not streaming in anybody from the Knicks, but they're not going to win, so it doesn't really matter how much.
Right.
Here we go. Here we go.
The Warriors are tough to pick out anybody to stream from, because who knows how Steve Kerr is going to run that rotation. I think a lot of the exciting guys in Houston are probably already rostered, and then the same thing for the Hawks. So I don't know, maybe some of these teams are just kind of different. I feel like the Thunder are probably the best team where it's like there's a couple options of streaming guys from. I have a league without any transaction limit. Or maybe actually there is a transaction limit, but it was a little higher and there's no games cap. And I'm streaming in Dillon Brooks tonight. I don't want to, but I was like, I'll get it. I'll get a game.
Gotta get a game.
Hopefully he doesn't shoot 1 for 9.
The Dillon Brooks experience is tough.
No, for all the talk that Noah just had about the Knicks not winning tonight, I'm a bit surprised that he wouldn't throw out the name DeAndre Hunter as a streaming option. 40% rostered. I know he's not the greatest in terms of defensive stats. We've discussed this before. He's better. It's like a positional defender than someone who's going to get out and get steals and blocks. But you think mainly about the Jalen Johnson shoulder injury. He's still questionable for Wednesday's game, if I'm not mistaken. So, and when he didn't play on Sunday, Hunter put up 20 shots off the bench. Now, he only made 7 of them, but I think the opportunity is there for him to be a value streaming option here if he's available in your league. So I think him, Deuce McBride is someone else I would consider in terms of his importance off the bench. He's 20% rostered. So I think those 2 guys are guys that I would seriously think about picking up for tonight, and maybe you get some value on Saturday as well based on who advances.
Yeah, Deuce McBride, man, just so efficient. So efficient. Over the last 2 weeks, over 50% from the field, 50% from 3. Just continues to be a lightning rod for that Knicks bench. And I'll throw out another name just in case. If Jalen Johnson doesn't play, Larry Nance, I think, will be a good fantasy ad there for tonight. But we'll see what transpires. We'll see who's going to. So who's your guy? Who's your pick for the NBA Cup?
I'm going to go Thunder over the Knicks.
Okay. Noah, what you got?
I'll go, without being a homer, I'll go Bucks over Thunder, because they have Darvin Ham and he doesn't lose NBA Cup games, and neither does Taurean Prince. So both undefeated in the NBA Cup. So I think it's going to be hard to beat.
I like it. So we're going to introduce a new thing here. Since we all stare at stats and data all the time, figured it was let's test our knowledge a little bit. So I'll pass it to Noah. What stats you got for us today?
All right. So well, I'll let you guys try and guess the player. Hopefully you didn't go look it up. But per 75 possessions, because that is the best way to evaluate players that aren't playing a lot. This player is averaging 14.2 rebounds, 1.1 steals, and 4.6 blocks per game. So I'll give you guys a second to think about it, which obviously, traditional center stats, things like that. And then I'll add in after I give you guys a guess, the fun part about this that I figured out while doing the research.
I'll let Raph go first.
All right. Man, that's a good. I'm gonna guess Isaiah Hartenstein. Okay. That would be my guess here.
Dan, you got a guess?
I'm gonna Jakob.
Okay. So neither of you guys are correct. This is rookie Donovan Clingan. So he's been nice. Yeah, he's been a beast. So this is something that so this has happened over the course of a season twice in NBA history. Both times during the 1998-99 season, both players played for the Kings.
Okay.
And you guys are not going to know a single name. Or maybe you will. If you do, then
Golden Ponies.
Peter Aluma, who played 2 games that year at 2.5 minutes per game.
Wait, what year is that?
He said
98-99.
Okay. Yeah, I know Keve Aluma. I don't know Peter Aluma. Yeah.
And then Jerome James, who played 16 games at 2.6 minutes per game.
Don't remind any Knicks fans about Jerome James.
Hey, my bad. I didn't mean to be a big cut on your wrath. But both of them played for the Kings that season. Barely played, but eventually, I guess within the possessions that they played, had enough blocks and steals and rebounds. They were able to achieve that amount. Like it was like 7.5 steals and blocks per 100% or 75 possessions, which is insane. But that's something that Donovan Clingan has done. So far during his rookie season. Obviously he's going to be out for a little while, but no other big or player has done that. So no Hakeem Olajuwon, no Shaquille O'Neal, no David Robinson, nobody. So this is basically telling you guys that Donovan Clingan is the best center of all time.
Something like that. Dude, the fact that you just mentioned Jerome James, I'm just thinking of like NBA Live 2003 with the Sonics. I feel like he was one of those bench dudes that I always I know he was wreaking havoc in the paint, man. That was my guy. Yeah, we were way off on that. I did not expect Clingan to be that.
That was my goal, was for you guys to get it wrong. So I'm glad I achieved that.
Raph, what you got for us?
Okay. It looks like I misread the title of the segment here. I went with like someone's stats over the last week instead of just
that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So this player over the last week has averaged 17.3 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 1.7 steals, 0.7 blocks, and 2.7 3-pointers per game.
I'll let you go first on this one, Dan, since Raph went first on the last one.
17, 5, and 7.
Almost 2 steals.
I want to say it's RJ Barrett, but I feel like he's averaging way more points than that. For lack of I'm just gonna go RJ Barrett. It's not him.
All right.
I feel like okay about this guess. TJ McConnell. No, okay. So I guess
the funny thing about it is that you're wearing the hoodie of the jersey. You're wearing the hoodie of the team this player plays for.
What's the hoodie? Oh, yeah, Ayo Dosunmu.
Yep,
that's
there it is.
Kind of what I was.
Wow. That's who it is. It is Ayo Dosunmu.
He's been hooping.
Yeah, we've talked about him on previous shows, recently as someone who needs to be rostered. Similar to Kawhi in LA. We don't know when Patrick Williams is going to be back, and Ayo, even before that, had been playing pretty well. He's just been able to take things up another notch, moving into the starting lineup. So, if he's available in your league, I would strongly suggest picking him up if you can. Not if you're going to drop someone essential, of course, but if you can afford to pick him up, I would definitely do that.
Yeah, I had him. He was my featured waiver ad of the week, mainly because looking beyond week 7, I think Ayo has the outlook and the runway to be really impactful for fantasy, especially if a trade happens. I mean, this dude put up a triple-double last week. Anytime anyone puts up a triple-double on waivers, that's available on waivers, you got to pick him up. So, yeah, that was a pretty good signal that they believe in Ayo, and I think he's going to continue to eat into Josh Giddey's workload there. I probably led the witness a little bit because I saw someone lurking late at night into the sheet, so he might have seen it. But I got my guy is fifth. It's a rookie, and he's fifth in the NBA in offensive rebounds, and he's at 3.8 offensive rebounds per game. Do you know who that player is?
I believe I do. I'm going to say Yves Missi. I didn't see anything late at night last night, but I'm going to say Yves Missi is my pick.
You are correct, sir.
Yeah.
You are correct. And I just want to speak on how good Yves Missi is. Like we'll talk about in a little bit when we get to the season awards, but there's only been 22 players in NBA history as a rookie to average at least 3.5 offensive rebounds per game. If you look at the last 10 games, Missi is averaging over 5. I think he can get to over 4 offensive rebounds a game. And if he does that, that will be top 10 all time. Some of the names listed along with him: Elton Brand, Hakeem Olajuwon, Dikembe Mutombo, Shaquille O'Neal, Clark Kellogg. Very interesting. And Chris Webber. So, yeah, I mean, this guy, fantasy, I'll talk about it a little bit, but like I just like guys that hustle and do the dirty work. They can get their second chance points, easy shots at the rim, rebounds, stocks, effort, deflections, all of that, all good things to kind of target for a fantasy player. And Yves Missi is the quiet hero of this class. All right, let's talk about some football for a second. NFL Week 15 in the thick of the fantasy football playoffs. Sunday Night Football. It's an NFC battle in the Pacific Northwest on Sunday night when Jordan Love and the Packers square off with Geno Smith and the Seahawks. Coverage of those matchups begin at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. As I mentioned before, we're about 30% done with the season. It's a little bit over a month and change, so we're going to give out some early season awards. Noah, who's your fantasy MVP?
Big surprise here. I'm going to go with Dyson Daniels as my MVP, a guy that was drafted outside the top 100. Currently is 21st in 9-cat rankings on Basketball Monster, averaging 3.2 steals per game, almost another block, and then over a 3 per game. So the steals were obviously incredibly high early on. He had that streak of games with at least 6 steals. It's been a little fluky as steals are, but he still had some big steal games, and they have been there fairly consistently, considering what stat it is. But the shooting percentages are also starting to improve for him, as he wasn't hitting shots at a high rate early on, outside of a couple of pretty good games, but he's starting to hit at a higher percentage, which I think was kind of the development we were hoping for, because it was like, oh, he's a decent playmaker and the steals will be there, but how much can he really help if he's like a shooting liability? But he's been getting better at that. So I'm expecting this level of production to continue for the rest of the year. But to this point, like, he is my MVP.
12th round ADP, currently a 3rd round player.
Not too bad.
Definitely fits the bill. 100%. Raph, who's your fantasy MVP?
I went with someone who had a much higher ADP, but he's been playing at another level before his injury. Now it'll be Franz Wagner. Top 50 player based on ADP, but I don't think anyone expected him to be a top 10 guy as he is now. Let's see. Yeah, 24.4 points, 5.6 rebounds, 5.7 assists. You're getting a little over 2 stats per game from him as well, and 2 3-pointers. And he's doing it on really good percentages, about 47 from the field and 88 from the foul line. He's been huge for that team. I think he's been huge for fantasy managers as well, because you essentially drafted another cornerstone with like a 4th or 5th round pick. And I don't think a lot of people were expecting that.
Yeah, and the production may drop off a little bit when he's back, and because Paolo will be back as well. But he's been so good at this point. I don't think it's going to be a massive drop off, because it's been more than just, oh, he's playing well because Paolo's out. Like, he's been so freaking good. So I think it's a great pick. I think I'm excited to see what he does when he gets back and see what this team can do.
Yeah, I mean, career highs in nearly every category, man. It's hard to argue with what Franz is doing. We continue to talk about him, Dyson Daniels. Both of those guys certainly are warranted for fantasy MVP, breakout, most improved. They could be fit into a lot of different categories for how good they've been in fantasy and in real life. One guy that I think is kind of going underappreciated is Josh Hart. Right now, he is 2nd round value, which is insane considering he was another guy that was drafted well outside the top 120. It's just, I mean, he's just so efficient. And the way he's getting his shots at the rim, he leads the league in field goal percentage for layups, which is usually a big man stat, but we know Josh Hart always plays bigger than he actually is. The rebounds, the stocks, he's averaging over 1.4 steals per game. Just extremely efficient. And I want to, as a Knicks guy, Raph, do you think that there's a sell high opportunity here for Josh Hart, or do you think that this is like who he is in this roster construction for the Knicks?
I'm kind of stuck in between those two things. Like, obviously the production will lead you to say sell high, but on the flip side, you look at that roster and what they gave up in the Towns and in the Towns trade, especially, he's in a position where there's a dire need for what he brings to the table. So he may not drop off all that much. I think as we see some of the other players who may have underperformed kind of get in the gear as the season wears on, he may fall a little bit, but I don't see why he can't be like a top 50 player for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I was on Dan Besbris's show yesterday, and we were talking about Josh Hart as a sell high, and I think he's averaging career highs, I believe, in assists and steals, which I think those are things that can stick. But I think the shooting percentage is just both of them, like both field goal percentage and 3-point percentage, are significantly higher than they've ever really been. Like, Dan, you mentioned at the rim shots, like he's shooting 77% in the restricted area. It's a 13% improvement from last year. I think his 3-point percentage is up about 8% from last year. So if those things tail off, he's still going to be fantastic in fantasy. But I think it is the fact that he is kind of a top 20 guy to this point that does make him a sell high. But at the same time, you're not going to get a true top 20 player for Josh Hart. So that may be something you just kind of ride the wave a little bit.
He is the second most rostered player on the best teams in Yahoo public leagues right now. So if you got Josh Hart on your team, you're probably sitting in pretty good standing right now and could probably get a pretty decent haul for him. 18th currently in 9-cat leagues right now, 93rd percentile in true shooting percentage. Just stupid production right there. Rookie of the year, Raph, who you got?
I went with Yves Missi. I think, I don't know, it's always funny when you talk like fantasy rookie of the year and how wide of a gulf there is with like the standard rookie of the year. But Missi, what he's done for New Orleans, he's been like one of the few bright spots for that franchise this year. He mentioned the rebounding stats earlier. He's getting more scoring. He does a lot of his work around the basket, which is perfectly fine for that roster, given the guys that they have to want to shoot. But I think he's unquestionably the fantasy rookie of the year right now. There may be one other option I'm sure will come up here in this conversation, but it's Missi from me all the way.
Who's your guy, Noah?
Yeah, I'm hoping this is the other guy that Raph was talking about, and that's Jared McCain. And I think the caveat with this is that I don't expect that, when we do these awards again or next time the awards idea comes up, that I don't expect Jared McCain to be a name, not a name mentioned, but I don't think he'll be the leader for this. I think it will be Yves Missi at that point, barring other changes that could happen to different rotations or other guys getting hot. But I just wanted to make sure to recognize what Jared McCain has done to this point, because he he didn't really help Philly win many games, but he did provide them some excitement when they were losing a lot. He's first in points and threes per game among rookies, which I think is kind of a different stat set than you usually get from successful rookies. A lot of the times it is these big men that can, shoot a high percentage, block shots, grab rebounds, and that's really it. And that obviously plays really well in fantasy, but it's not often that rookie guards have as much success as McCain has.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I was between McCain and Missi for the award. I gave it the edge to Missi because I think if we're talking about sustainability, I think his role is a little bit more secure. I just saw videos of Joel Embiid playing King of the Hill with his teammates. So he looks like he's getting more comfortable. If he continues to stay in the fold, Paul George stays healthy, huge, massive ifs. Think that could hurt Jared McCain long-term, but the kid's been outstanding thus far. And Missi, I gave my vote to him because he does lead the rookies in double-doubles. He's averaging one over the course of the last 30 days. He's the highest ranked rookie in totals value. So while we talked about Donovan Clingan earlier and what he does on a per 75 basis, he just hasn't been available enough. And Jared McCain, I think, is a guy that's going to stay around. So I think Noah's right. This is going to be a battle rookie of the year between those two guys. we'll see. Maybe DeAndre Hunter's move, maybe Zachary Shai enters that conversation as well. Alex Sarr hasn't been as great offensively, but hey, man, Kyle Kuzma's off that roster, and maybe you move Jonas Valanciunas. That guy could have a whole nother opportunity as well. So definitely some other names to watch there, but my vote would be for Misi. Talked about a couple of these guys already, but so we can just do a quick round of breakout players. My breakout player was Franz Wagner. Think he's, obviously been a first round value right now, despite being having an ADP in the 4th round. So he's just been great in my opinion. Raph, who's your guy?
It was Dyson Daniels. I know he was a Noah's pick for MVP, and I think similar line of thinking. No one expected Dyson Daniels to play at this level that he has. Like, obviously the opportunity was greater in Atlanta than it was in New Orleans, but you weren't expecting this. He's made a jump similar to what we saw from Jalen Johnson, so yeah, he's my breakout player.
Yeah. And my breakout player is Jalen Williams, who I know we talked about a little bit earlier when we were talking about their game against Dallas. He's averaging career highs across the board, really. And he's gone from just being a really, really good fantasy player, which is what he was for his first 2 years, to like a bona fide fantasy superstar.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think we'll be having conversations about whether or not he should be drafted in the 1st round next year.
Yeah, I think that's fair, man. I mean, I think, I'm wondering if you do a redraft. That's actually something we should probably consider one time. Like, we should do a redraft and see where some of these players that we were high on that are playing very well now, where would they go if we were drafting now? And that's a call to you guys. If your fantasy football team sucks, go get a fantasy basketball team, man. It's a lot of fun. Still playing on Yahoo, you can still draft. So Jalen Williams is definitely someone that would move up the ranks for me. We're gonna go from the court to the I keep on saying the pitch, from the court to the links. The Grant Thornton Invitational, stars of the PGA Tour and LPGA team up in Naples for the Grant Thornton Invitational. Find out Lydia Ko and Jason Day can defend their title in Florida from Friday through Sunday on NBC, Golf Channel, and Peacock. So to close out some of these awards, those are the more traditional ones. Also got some fun ones here. We're going to go through a little speed round of it. I'm going to give this award, I'm going to call it the How Are You Still Available in My League Award, to highlight those under-rostered players that are still crushing it in fantasy that are not over 50% rostered. My guy, Goga Bitadze, talk about him a lot. Think he's going to have a really good opportunity over the next couple of weeks. Continues to solidify that center spot for the Magic, and I don't think he's going away. Noah, who's your guy?
I got Tari Eason, 49% roster on Yahoo. He's top 50 and 9 cat. Obviously, the defensive numbers are kind of carrying his value, but he doesn't really hurt you anywhere. He doesn't have bad percentages or a ton of turnovers. He just doesn't get you many assists or get you many threes. Like, he's halfway decent at those, but I think there's also a little bit of upside there for him to be even better if Houston ends up making some sort of consolidation trade at the deadline. I'm not saying that there's been heavy rumors that that's going to happen, but it's a possibility, and I think Eason's game is built for fantasy.
Facts.
Yeah, my pick, I went with Eve Misi, 35% roster in Yahoo leagues. I know we talked about in the Q&A yesterday, his ranking isn't great, but the opportunity is such that I think you have to overlook what his ranking is right now and take the plunge, just because the other options at center at this point are Daniel Tice and Kylo Matkovich, who spent more time in the G League than he has with the big club. So It's Eve Misi for me.
And who's the bench warmer that's burning us award? The big name who's actively killing your fantasy team, Raph. Maybe you have this guy rostered on that team that's currently not competing right now.
Yeah, I do. You might as well stay in New Orleans for this one. It's got to be Zion Williamson. I don't really know what else there is to say at this point, because it's been the story of his career, sadly. The availability. And we don't know when he'll be back this season. And so, yeah, that's my pick. You can't really drop him, but it's just sinking my roster like a stone right now, and it's not a good feeling. At least it's not a money league. That's all I'll say.
Oh, that's huge.
Good.
Yeah,
that's huge. My guy kind of stretched the, I guess, what qualifies as a big name. But, I mean, he's a big name, just not a big fantasy name. But Kyle Kuzma, my expectations were low for him, but my goodness, it's been awful this year. Career lows in threes and all 3 shooting percentages, field goal percent, free throw percent, 3-point percentage. His points, rebounds, and assists are all the lowest since he left the Lakers, 3rd worst of his career besides the 2 years he was on a competitive Lakers team. Yeah, man, he's outside the top 300, I believe. He's usually a pretty good source of points, rebounds, and assists. He hasn't been, and he's been worse than usual with the percentages. Like, I don't think he's necessarily a rosterable player at this point, but he's also like one of those guys that he's probably too much of a name for you to drop.
Yeah, man. I'm even in points leagues. I don't think that he's really a rosterable player, which is really the good thing about Kuz. You can forgive the inefficiencies, but this dude's at 25 fantasy points per game. Like, that's not Kyle Kuzma production right there. So, yeah, I think he definitely deserves an award. I mean, I had Zion Williamson on my list. I'm actually debating dropping him because I only have one IL spot in this one of my pay leagues. And I'm like, dude, I got other injuries I got to take care of, man. Like, I can't wait for you to come back. You already don't look in shape. You don't have a clear timeline. It's bad news. How about the can't watch, just give me the stats award? So this is for the ugliest player to watch in real life, who's great on your fantasy box score. Raph, who do you got on this one?
I almost took your pick, but that would have been like heavy levels of heavy levels of salt. Yeah, heavy levels of salt and hate from last year's playoff series. So instead, I went with Giannis. He can be dominant, but it's just this constant battering ram style of basketball that's like, this isn't very fun to watch. When the athleticism isn't there, like when he's just like jumping over people and dunking on them, that's fun. But I don't know, it's just the way he has to play to be most effective. It works for him, certainly, but it's just not fun to watch. And then I'm tired of wondering when they're going to call that 10-second violation at the foul line.
It's getting bad, dude. Like it was already bad before, but like, we're just literally, it's like another timeout, just waiting for this dude to just get through his process. Like, come on.
Yeah, there we go. So, yeah, he's my pick.
Yeah, I like y'all's picks a little bit better than mine. I feel like I leaned more into the who's great for the fantasy box score that I don't really care to watch. It's Nikola Vucevic, who's been awesome, but he's like it's not must-see TV. Like, Vooch is on national TV. Like, let's make sure to check out this game. Like, it just doesn't happen. I don't want to come off as a hater for that because it's like, but it's just like not that exciting. But I think I really want to emphasize like who, like, we'll let Dan say his pick, but I think what his pick does is the foul baiting, and it's why a number of other names kind of cross my mind. But I feel like some of those guys have some more redeeming qualities to their game that makes it look like I didn't want to do it when they're when he plays tonight and I want him to win, but like there's nothing more infuriating than Trae Young's foul baiting as a fan of the team. And I can't imagine what it would be like if he wasn't on my team, but he has like the fun passes and the fun dribble moves that make it a little bit of it more enjoyable to watch when it's not happening. But this is just all setting the floor for Dan. You please make your pick.
It's Joel Embiid, man. Like, I can't stand, and this is as a fan, I can't watch him play basketball, dude. The flopping, the foul baiting, the complaining, the suspect, antics. That's what Raph is referring to about the playoff series that, Mitchell Robinson still isn't playing basketball yet. I think that might have something to do with it. But also it's just the way that the style of play around Joel Embiid, like an Embiid-centric offense is not fun to watch. It takes out other players, less creativity, it's just not good basketball. It's not a good brand of basketball to watch. So, hey, if he's healthy, I'll happily look at the box score, see he put up, 25 points, 11 boards, 3 blocks. Cool. Awesome. Didn't need to watch the game to see that. And I'd also give a shout out. If we're talking about foul baiting, Jalen Brunson deserves
we can't let him get off
as well.
That's fine. That's fine.
See at the table as well.
That's fine.
Yeah, that was a fun one. We're gonna revisit these later in the season, probably around the All-Star break. So it'll be fun to see how this kind of unfolds for the rest of the year. But let's get to some player debates. We already touched on the buy, sell, hold for Jalen Suggs. I think that there's an argument and a case to be made for him to be a sell high. I think those that have him would also argue like, oh man, it's a great opportunity to hold. What about Lauri Markkanen? Because I think that it's a really interesting scenario because not only is he not playing particularly well, there's obviously the risk of him being shut down later in the season, but he's still a decent fantasy player that, I don't know, you could say like he's a buy low right now, right? Like, or is this a guy, Noah, that you're like, the risk outweighs the reward, and it's probably to stay away from me?
Depends on how low you can buy. And I think that's going to be my cheat answer for every single one of these you ask. But I think it's like he hasn't been very good. He's been even worse recently when you just look at the numbers. And like, sure, he might get back to being what he was over the last 2 years. And it might last for about 2 months, but he could get traded. And what does his role look like on his new team? He could get shut down again. And that obviously isn't great. So I think if you can buy really, really low, then yeah, I'd be interested at some point. But like that's kind of what it is. Like, what's the price?
What's the price? Julius Randle?
Oh, hell no. I'm not selling Markkanen for Julius Randle. That's
too.
You're saying you'd rather have Markkanen than
I'd rather have Markkanen than Randle.
Okay,
yes.
yeah, I agree. I thought you were saying the flip side, but
Cam Johnson riding high. That seems like a perfect sell high opportunity if you could get Markkanen off of that, but I doubt someone would do that. But someone did do it in Yahoo, actually.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to find the value for Markkanen. He's a third rounder, right? So you're gonna want something that's, and I don't know that you can find a comparable player to that, even though he's probably stay away from me because I don't like the situation with the Jazz. But what about Jakob Poeltl? We talked about him a little bit earlier. Now that we know that Scottie Barnes is going to be missing multiple weeks, do you think that this is an opportunity, Raph, to take advantage, sell high? Maybe you can get like a top 50, 40 guy for him? Or is this like, rather hold, see this thing through?
I think I would. I don't know. I look at that position in that situation in Toronto. It's like he'd probably be a hold for me. Like you have Kelly Olynyk, but it's not. I don't think he's going to be someone who's going to take like large amounts of minutes from him. And there may even be times when they're on the court together, as part of a bigger lineup, just because of Olynyk's ability to step away from the basket. So I think Poeltl would be a hold. I can certainly understand, the thought behind selling high, because you lose one of your best creators and playmakers. Who knows what's going to happen to his opportunities, but I feel like Poeltl can get enough on the offensive glass and as a rebounder in general to kind of preserve the majority of his value that he had when Barnes was on the floor.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the same boat. And I think the main factor that I'm looking at is what's going to happen at the trade deadline in February with Scottie Barnes out, Emmanuel quickly out. Like, I would be shocked if they didn't at least try to move Poeltl. And like, where does he end up? Does he end up with the Lakers and he's starting at center, but they also like AD at center, so he's playing 20 minutes per game? Like, that's not a great, but it could look entirely different. So it's hard to predict something like that, which would make me almost lean a little bit more towards selling for somebody that's a little bit safer in that regard. But I don't think there's anything wrong with holding him at this point because the production is definitely going to be there for at least 2 more months.
In the case of a sell high, do you think Desmond Bane is too low, or do you think that that's a reasonable target?
You're saying Poeltl for Desmond Bane?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's reasonable.
Yeah, it might be.
Bane hasn't been great, but I think his opportunities will only increase as the season wears on.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Bane has, he's been frustrating. He's been getting better. He's still been a little bit frustrating. So hopefully, I think that's something I would do.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like realistic offers, but like I think Poeltl is one of those guys where like I think a fantasy manager would be willing to trade him because he doesn't have a lot of name notoriety. You probably didn't draft him particularly high. So I feel like going for like a 3rd, 4th rounder would probably be like Bane, DeJounte Murray territory sounds right, but I don't, it's hard. I feel like people are really reluctant to move off those top 3, picks that they had in their fantasy league. So I don't know if Jakob Poeltl is going to be enough driver to get there. Man, Cam Johnson. I'm surprised we didn't talk about him as being one of the breakouts or underrated guys, but he's been like insanely efficient. Probably a sell. Actually, let's talk about Cam Johnson. Maybe what are you guys doing with Cam Johnson? Do you think he's a hold just given the Brooklyn situation? It's much like the Jazz, I would say. But it sounds like they want to keep him around. So like, is that someone that you actually think could maintain top 30 value for the rest of the season?
I think he's a sell high to me. I think he's had an incredible shooting stretch, and it's lasted a good bit of the season. But I think that there has also been the rumors that he will get traded, and I think there was I think the Warriors specifically. There may have been another team as well that was interested in him and a couple other guys they have. And if he's playing in Golden State, it's a little bit of a different pecking order, especially if they're making other moves to bring in more stars to try and maybe make one last run at a title. Cam Johnson's role looks different. He's not going to be able to hold this, I don't think.
Yeah, he's a sell high for me as well. In addition to the trade rumors, they also still need to figure out what they have with Derek Whitehead, their first round pick from a couple years ago. So if Brooklyn isn't in the conversation for like a play-in spot or a playoff spot, that he may be one person whose minutes increase at the detriment of a Cam Johnson as the season wears on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I'm definitely trying to field some offers for Cam Johnson. I'm reaching a bit high here because the guy is ranked out. What is he? I think he's 20. What I see in the last BBM rankings. Where does he sit? He is
32 is what I just saw.
32. Yeah, that's crazy. No, I see him as 26. Oh, that's total value. Even so, that's crazy. Top 30 player in fantasy right now. Crazy. That'll do it for the NBA. That'll do it for the Rotoworld basketball show. My NBA show, Rotoworld basketball show. We'll see you next Wednesday. Same time, same place. Good luck in week 8. Peace.